040. This is a mid-size family SUV, and it's from BYD. The 2026 Sealion 6 DM-i is claiming up to 1,000 kilometers of combined range. That's over 620 miles on one full tank and one full charge. Meanwhile, people are still arguing online about whether 400 kilometers is enough. Here's the crazy part. Everyone is talking about the range, but the real shock, it's how BYD is doing it, because this isn't a full EV. It's not trying to replace gas overnight. It's not forcing you to install a charger. It's not betting your entire road trip on a charging station that might be broken. It's a DMI, dual mode intelligent. Translation? It drives like an EV most of the time. Silent, smooth, instant torque. But when the battery runs low, the engine quietly steps in like a backup generator. No drama, no range anxiety, no excuses. And that's exactly why Toyota should be nervous. Because, for years, Toyota owned the smart hybrid conversation. Prius, RAV for hybrid, bulletproof reputation. But now, BYD just showed up with a plug-in hybrid SUV that can potentially outrange both traditional hybrids and many full EVs. And here's the uncomfortable question. If you can drive electric in the city, and drive gas on road trips, and get 1,000 kilometers combined, why would the average family pick anything else? But wait, before we crown it the new king, we need to look deeper, because numbers on paper are one thing. Build quality, design confidence, real-world presence, that's where legacy brands usually fight back. So let's walk up to it and see if this 1,000 kilometers range king actually looks the part. First, understand why this car exists. BYD is not building the Sealion 6 just to compete. They're building it to dominate the transition phase. Right now, the global market is split into three camps: full EV believers, hybrid loyalists, and people who are confused. The confused group, that's the biggest one. They want better fuel economy, they want lower running costs, but they don't want to gamble on charging infrastructure, especially outside major cities. That's the gap, and BYD saw it. The DM-i system is built around efficiency first. The electric motor does most of the driving. The gasoline engine mainly acts as a generator at lower speeds, only directly driving the wheels when needed at higher loads. The goal? Keep the engine in its most efficient zone. It's not about power headlines. It's about stretching every drop of fuel. Now step back and look at the Sealion 6. This is not a quirky eco car. It is wide, confident, clean. The front fascia has that signature BYD Ocean design language. Slim LED headlights, a smooth, closed-off grille area. Air intakes position low to widen the visual stance. And here's something subtle. The hood line sits slightly higher than many compact crossovers. That gives it a more SUV-like presence. Not too tall, not boxy, just enough muscle. Walk to the side. The proportions are balanced. The wheelbase looks long relative to the overhangs, which suggests decent interior space. The character line running across the doors is sharp, but not over-styled. No fake vents, no unnecessary aggression. This is mature design, like the wheel arches, slightly squared. That gives it a planted stance, especially if paired with 18 or 19-inch wheels, depending on trim. And now the details. Panel gaps. From early footage and showroom units, alignment looks tight. Consistent spacing along the hood and doors. That matters, because 5 years ago, critics loved saying Chinese cars look good in photos, but not up close. That excuse is fading. Paint depth appears rich, especially in darker blues and metallic grays. Under direct light, the flake reflects evenly. No patchy clear coat effect. Door handle pull. Solid resistance, not flimsy. And when you close the door, you get a proper thunk. Not a tinny echo, not hollow. That sound tells you something about structure. Now let's talk about the rear. This is where many SUVs play it safe, but the BYD didn't. Full-width LED light bar. Clean integration. The BYD logo sits centered, illuminated on some variants. The rear bumper is sculpted, but not busy. Reflectors sit low, widening the stance visually. And here's why Toyota, and even Tesla, should pay attention. This design doesn't scream budget. It doesn't scream compliance car. It looks like a product built by a company that knows it's winning. Because BYD isn't just a car maker. They build their own batteries, their own power electronics. Vertical integration gives them cost control most legacy brands can't match. So when this SUV lands in markets with aggressive pricing, and pricing is expected to undercut many Japanese rivals depending on region, that's where the real disruption begins. You're not just buying an SUV, you're buying into a new supply chain reality, and that's bigger than headlights and body lines. But here's the thing, exterior confidence is easy. The real test? The cabin, because that's where families live. And what BYD did inside the Sealion 6 changes the conversation again. But we'll get there. Open the door. And this is where things get uncomfortable for legacy brands. Because 5 years ago, Chinese interiors were flashy, big screens, wild colors, but the materials, questionable. This, different story. First impression, calm. Horizontal layout, clean dash, no clutter explosion. The center display sits proud in the middle, large tablet style. In many BYD models, it rotates. Yes. Physically rotates between portrait and landscape. Whether this specific 2026 variant keeps that feature may vary by market, but the brand DNA is there. But screen size isn't the point. Touch the dash. Soft touch across the upper section. Not hard plastic pretending to be premium. The grain pattern is tight, uniform. No cheap shine under light. Run your fingers along the stitching line. Even spacing. No loose threads. The contrast stitching pops without screaming for attention. And here's something subtle. The door panel armrest has real padding, not that thin foam layer that collapses after 6 months. Press into it. It holds shape. That matters on long drives. Now the seats. Expect leather or leatherette depending on trim. The bolstering is moderate, not sports sedan aggressive, not flat either. It hugs without squeezing. But the bigger story? Space. The wheelbase pays off. Rear legroom looks generous for a mid-size SUV. The floor is relatively flat in the back, which means the middle passenger isn't fighting a massive transmission tunnel. Remember, this platform is designed with electrification in mind. And wait till you see the rear seat recline angle. Families will notice that headroom appears solid thanks to a gently curved roofline. Even with the panoramic glass roof option expected in higher trims, it doesn't feel cave-like. Now, let's talk sound. Close all the doors. Sit inside. That outside noise drop? Immediate. BYD has been investing heavily in NVH noise, vibration, harshness, and it shows. The door seals look thick. The glass feels substantial. Combined with the fact that at low speeds it runs primarily on electric power, city driving should feel almost EV quiet. That's dangerous for Toyota, because Toyota hybrids still let the engine jump in loudly under acceleration. You've heard that drone. This, different philosophy, smooth first, engine later. Center console layout is practical. Physical buttons still exist for key functions. That's important. Climate controls buried inside screens? Annoying. BYD seems to understand that not everything should be touch-only. Storage, deep center bin, dual cup holders, wireless charging pad expected on mid to higher trims, USB ports front and rear. This isn't concept car minimalism. This is everyday usability. And here's the shift. If you blindfolded someone and sat them inside, they wouldn't say, "Oh, this feels like a budget disruptor." They'd say, "This feels established." That's the scary part. Now, we break the magic trick, because 1,000 kilometers sounds insane, but let's be precise. That number is typically a combined range figure based on internal testing cycles, often under standards like NEDC or CELT-C in some markets, which can be more optimistic than WELT-PAT or EPA.SO. Real-world range will depend on driving style, terrain, and temperature. Transparency matters. Now here's how DMI works. You've got a battery pack usually in the range of roughly 15 to 20 plus kWh, depending on configuration in similar BYD systems. That enables meaningful electric-only driving, often 80 to 120 kilometers of pure EV range under ideal test cycles. That covers most daily commutes. Then you have a highly efficient gasoline engine, around 1.5 liters in many DMI applications. But here's the twist. It doesn't behave like a normal engine. At low speeds, the electric motor does most of the work. The engine primarily acts as a generator to recharge the battery. It only directly drives the wheels when it's most efficient to do so. Instead of revving wildly like older hybrids, it stays in its optimal zone. Think of it as a range extender that can also assist mechanically when needed. Result: extremely low fuel consumption when the battery is depleted. In some existing DMI models, fuel consumption claims sit around 4-5 liters per 100 kilometers when operating as a hybrid. Real world may vary, but that's competitive with and sometimes better than traditional hybrids. Add electric-only city driving, hybrid efficiency on highways, fuel tank capacity sized for long-distance travel. That's how you reach the 1,000 kilometers headline. Magic. Smart system architecture. Now compare that to a full EV. If you buy a Tesla Model Y, you get pure electric, instant torque, but you rely fully on charging infrastructure. If you buy a Toyota RAV4 hybrid, you get efficiency, but no plug-in advantage. No meaningful EV, only commuting. The Sealion 6 DM-i sits right in between. And for many markets, especially Southeast Asia, Australia, parts of Europe, and developing EV regions, that's the sweet spot. This isn't about beating Tesla in acceleration, it's about beating anxiety. And that's a bigger war. Talk reality. Charging. As a plug-in hybrid, you can charge it at home using AC. Expect typical overnight charging times depending on wallbox capacity. We're not talking ultra-fast DC charging like a full EV. That's not the focus here. You plug it in at night, wake up, drive electric all day. If you forget to charge, it still works. That flexibility is powerful. Now cost. Exact global pricing for the 2026 model will vary by region and taxes. But based on current BYD positioning, it's expected to undercut many Japanese and Korean plug-in hybrid SUVs while offering competitive tech. That's the formula. High spec, lower price, strong range. Headline: if priced aggressively in the 30,000–40,000 range depending on market, and that's projection territory, it could pressure RAV4 hybrid, RAV4 prime, and even entry EV SUVs. Running costs: electric commuting equals lower daily fuel spend. Efficient hybrid backup equals fewer gas station visits. BYD's in-house blade battery tech also has a strong safety reputation within the industry. Maintenance: traditional engine components still exist, so it's not as simple. But because the engine isn't constantly stressed at high RPM like conventional setups, long-term durability could be strong. Though real-world long-term data for this specific model will take time. And here's the psychological angle. People fear full commitment. Full EV feels like jumping into the deep end. DMI feels like training wheels, but fast ones. That's why this car matters more than some 800 horsepower electric super sedan. This is mass market warfare, but we're not done. Because there's one final question. Does this actually threaten Tesla's dominance? Or is this really a Toyota problem? Let's reset expectations. This is not a drag strip monster if you're expecting plaid-level insanity. Wrong channel. The Sealion 6 DM-i is built around efficiency first. In similar BYD DM-i setups, total system output often lands somewhere in the 200 to 220 horsepower range depending on configuration. That's enough. Not headline crazy, but more than sufficient for daily life. 60 mph, projected to land in the 7 to 8 second range, depending on weight and trim. Respectable, smooth, not violent. But here's what matters more: instant response off the line. Because electric motor, When the light turns green, there's no waiting for revs to climb, no CVT drone screaming before motion happens. You press, it moves. Clean, immediate, linear, and in city driving, which is where most families spend 80% of their time, it will feel quicker than the numbers suggest. Now highway, merging. When you floor it, the engine will join the party. You may hear it, but because the system tries to keep it in its efficiency band, it won't flare like older hybrid systems. The transition should feel smoother than traditional CVT hybrids. Ride quality? Based on BYD's recent tuning philosophy, expect comfort, bias over sport, softer initial suspension travel, enough damping to avoid float, steering likely tuned for lightness in urban settings rather than track precision, and honestly, that's correct. This SUV is about calm confidence, not burgering bragging rights. Brakes will blend regenerative and friction braking. The feel matters. If tuned well, the pedal should feel progressive, not grabby, not artificial. This is where legacy brands usually claim superiority, but BYD has been closing that gap fast. Oh no, this isn't a Model Y performance killer. But that's not the fight. Let's break this down clearly. Tesla sells the future. Toyota sells reliability. BYD? It's selling transition power. If you're fully committed to electric life, home charger, road trip planning, charging apps installed, you're still looking at Tesla, Hyundai, Kia, maybe even BYD's own full EVs. But if you're not ready, if you live in an apartment, if charging infrastructure in your region is still inconsistent, if your parents share the car and they don't want to think about kilowatts, that's where the Sealion 6 becomes dangerous. Toyota RAV4 hybrid owners love fuel savings, but they still visit gas stations regularly, and they don't get meaningful EV-only driver. RAV4 Prime gives plug-in capability, but pricing in many markets pushes it higher. Availability can be limited. So here comes BYD, likely undercutting on price, matching or exceeding tech, offering longer combined range headline, and wrapping it in modern design. That's pressure. Now Tesla. Tesla doesn't compete directly on plug-in hybrids. But here's the indirect threat. If customers delay full EV adoption because plug-in hybrids like this satisfy 90% of their needs, that slows pure EV growth, and Tesla thrives on EV acceleration. So while Toyota feels immediate heat, Tesla feels strategic pressure. This is a different kind of war at horsepower, option curve. And BYD is playing both sides. They sell full EVs. They sell plug-in hybrids. They build batteries for themselves. Vertical integration plus flexibility. That's a dangerous combo. And here's the truth most legacy executives don't want to say out loud. The average family does not care about ideology. They care about cost, convenience, peace of mind. If this SUV gives them electric driving Monday to Friday and zero stress on Saturday road trips, that's powerful. Zoom out. This isn't just about one SUV. This is about how the transition phase might last longer than expected. Governments push EV mandates. Infrastructure builds slowly. Consumers hesitate. Plug-in hybrids fill the gap. And companies like BYD that control batteries, motors, electronics, and final assembly can adjust faster than companies relying on external suppliers. If fuel prices spike, emphasize EV mode. If charging networks lag, emphasize hybrid flexibility. Agility wins. And the Sealion 6 DM-i represents that agility. It's not trying to be the future, it's trying to win the present. That's smarter. So, is the 2026 BYD Sealion 6 DM-i the 1,000 kilometers range king? On paper, yes. Within combined test cycle definitions. In real life, it depends on how you drive. It depends on whether you charge regularly. It depends on your region's fuel and electricity costs. But here's what's undeniable. This SUV makes range anxiety feel outdated. It makes hybrid tech feel modern again. And it forces Toyota to respond faster. It also quietly tells Tesla something important. Not everyone is ready to jump. Some people want a bridge, and BYD just built one. Wide one, with 1,000 kilometers written across it in bold letters. This isn't the loudest